It's interesting, the issue of our behavior, because we are complaining, we are seeing the effects of climate change, and then we sit back and realize human activities is excavating this issue. And like you've mentioned, we need to look at our behavior and what's changing that. Yeah. Do you think this is an information that is getting to people, where people are understanding that we are biting more than we can chew, where we try to compete with wildlife? You want to encroach in their zone, yes, and you cut trees thinking like we need this more than the mother nature needs it, and then it comes back and bites us. Do we really have an understanding of where all these changes in climate is coming from?
I think we have an understanding. It's just that we are hard. We are probably one of those people that the Bible calls that their hearts are hard. You know where the problem is, and you know what is required of you, but you still continue to make it even worse. I'll give a very clear example. We need to develop. That one, I'm not opposed to it. We need to develop. And so when you focus your development on areas where forests grow, then it will require you to cut down a few trees. So the road network within Nairobi has had a very, very huge impact of cutting down some trees along the Ngong Forest Sanctuary, and some parts of Karura also. We've had to cut down some trees to grant access to roads. While they are good, it actually takes us a few steps back. Then where we have infrastructure, we don't have a deliberate strategy of even planting trees along our highways, because that way you replace what you cut. But if we can do it in a sustainable manner, that you don't destroy the entire ecosystem, but at least you leave some intact. So you destroy, but then you also restore. It would also be very important. The one that I find quite challenging for Kenyans is, you know very well, you can't grow maize in Taita. You cannot grow maize in some parts of Ukambani. But you want to compete with the maize farmers in Uasin Gishu. And when you grow your maize, it's this tall, and it just dies. And every year in, year out, farmers keep on growing maize in areas where they know they won't have a good harvest. That's what I call bad behavior, right? You're growing something in an area that you know once the rains are not there, and the rains, rain for a short time, but even the crop, the outcome is not very good. So we need to run away from that bad behavior. In Kenya, we have a strategy which we call Kenya Climate Smart Agriculture. And I think it's been rolled in most of these counties. And I would really urge the CS, once it takes office, responsible for agriculture, to begin looking at climate smart crops, not GMO crops, climate smart crops. Because in the ASAL areas, there are lots of activities that can benefit from the environment and can also benefit from climate smart agriculture. And one of them is the bees. You need the bees to pollinate in order for you to get a good harvest. And so the reason why I say don't take GMOs in ASAL's area is GMOs do not need bees to do any pollination. They're already designed in such a way that they can, produce for you without the bees. And so what happens when we kill the bees? It means then the average Kenyan and the average food production that we used to enjoy is actually going to reduce. And there are so many reasons that various proponents who are for GMOs and those who are against have actually argued about it. But I'm speaking for biodiversity, because every insect in this environment matters. And so we need to ensure that we are growing crops that will actually will actually promote cross-pollination, particularly of the bees, so that then the entire ecosystem is complete. Climate smart agriculture is the best way to go. And in terms of mitigating conflicts, there are some of those climate smart crops that can be grown in the ASAL's area, where wildlife is, that are not really prone to be eaten by wildlife, and elephants including. I'll just mention a few. In my work in Kenya, I've not heard about conflicts between cashew farmers and elephant, yet we've got elephants in Narabuko Sokoke but there has been no conflict between cashew farmers and elephants. I've not heard about conflicts in Meru among the elephants and macadamia growers or the miraa growers. I'm just using them as an example. So we can encourage also the growing of climate smart crops that of high value like macadamia that require rain when it is very little, but also in the Asals area, mangoes do very well. So we can also encourage the growing of fruit mangoes. If you go to Garissa right now, I think a lot of people have actually realized that mangoes are doing very well, and a lot of mangoes are being transported from Garissa to Nairobi, like also what's happening in Mombasa. So we need to encourage our farmers to change from what they used to do, so that then we also get them also contribute in terms of mitigating climate change and also being change makers to reverse what we're experiencing at the moment. The issue of agriculture expansion into critical areas, cutting coffee in exchange for houses like what has happened in Kiambu and other areas, and I still see coffee being cut in replacement. Yes, there is demand for housing, but we need to trade cautiously with that. Yeah.
Looking at your area and seeing what it's good for, it's something you've really insisted on. Don't plant maize in where the environment doesn't allow that. I think that's where now the issue of adaptation comes in, right?
Yes.
There are communities who've lived in an area for a very long time. They have an indigenous knowledge of that place, and probably they're doing things that they're able to adapt to the situation that it's there. Yeah? Do you think this is something that the government is recognizing? Do they have a support system for those people who are trying to adapt to the situation as it is?
Yes, like I told you, the problem starts with the average Kenyan. Behavior change starts with them. It doesn't start with government. The government technocrats within the government agencies and ministries understand these issues very well. But you see, the way then the information goes is either because we don't have it in our education curriculum system, then as children grow up, as children go through the education curriculum system, they also don't learn the importance of protecting and keeping the environment intact. And I think over a period of time, that's where we lost it. Our education curriculum is actually not teaching people the importance of the environment. I wish we can replace history with the importance of environment so that we just remove the history, because I don't need to know the history of another country or the history of Kenya, but I just need to know Kenya is endowed with this natural resource, and this natural resource requires a healthy and resilient habitat in order for it to thrive. So I fault education. Our education system has focused on white-collar jobs, but has not focused on what the average Kenyan needs to know around the environment where they live. The second issue has also been our behaviors. Sand harvesting along our rivers. And now is when it's biting us so hard that we have so many seasonal rivers that have actually dried in the country. Yes, yet historically, they would flow at least for 6 or 8 months of the year and then dry a little bit, and when the rain comes, they flow. Why? It's because we have over-harvested along our river. So what happens when you're over-harvesting of sand along a river happens? It therefore means that you've exposed the ground, because sand plays that function of retaining water in the soil. So whenever it rains upstream, the water flows, but it retains some. So it's able to deliver water as far as the flow can take it. But if you extract the sand, the water just percolates onto the ground, and you don't have that flow. And that's why our rivers are dry. So one habit we need to look at is sand harvesting. We need to stop it. We need to look for alternatives for constructing houses without necessarily having to go to our rivers to extract sand. In the area where I come from, it's sad that our county governments watch sand actually being carried by trucks, and what is paid for harvesting the sand is so little compared to what those guys are going to sell to those guys who are constructing. So we destroy our environment in making very little, then we suffer the consequences later on. The other area that we need to work on, and remember, removing the focus from government to an average Kenyan.
Yeah.
Because when the problem like climate change is not only affecting government, but it's affecting all of us. The other issue that we need to deal with very, very carefully now at the government level is make sure that you have the right interventions, the right mitigation and adaptation measures in place. When money comes for climate change, it's not time to support allowances for government officials. It's time to put the money into mitigation. Remember, right now we are talking about mitigation and adaptation. The challenge with mitigation and adaptation, it takes long to restore. But for you to extract, it takes a very short time. But once you've destroyed, it takes a long time.
True.
So we need a lot of patience in restoring degraded areas. We need a lot of patience in encouraging Kenyans to actually support the restoration program. The last head of state that actually spoke about restoration program was the late Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi, when he was talking about Momonyoko ya Udongo. No other president has put a lot of emphasis on the environment, soil erosion, and reforestation. Landslides are becoming a common thing. In fact, we'll talk about it when we get to Lake Bogoria, and not Lake Bogoria, Lake Amnarok. We'll talk about it there. And look at now what's happening in the Rift Valley, the rising water lakes. Nobody can explain. No scientist has been able to tell why all of a sudden we've got lots of water in the Rift Valley lakes, but in some certain areas, we actually don't have enough water. So there are a lot of human-induced activities. The other one is charcoal burning. Haki hapo Mungu needs to come and help us. We cut trees for charcoal every day. And when you ask the average person, it tells you, hii ndio kazi naweza fanya, naweza pata pesa kidogo. And when you look at how much money they are selling a whole sack of charcoal, it is so little. Now there are no trees to cut. They are uprooting stumps. They are uprooting stumps. So when you uproot a stump, what next do you have? And I think to me this is where the biggest challenge is. How do I convince this guy that in order for you to extract charcoal, you need to plant a tree so that you can make your business sustainable? You cannot just be cutting trees left, right, center and not growing them and expecting that the rain is going to improve. And I think this has been the trend that poverty has driven us to actually get us to the situation where we are, and that poverty has even made our situation worse than it was. So it's become like a roller coaster cycle that we need to run away from. And this is where government, with the policies that they have, need actually to play a critical role by allocating resources in restoring the ecosystems and the environment, so that we can reverse the impact of climate change. Now, that is one level that we are actually the major cause. The other level is the industries that are coming. Now we have clean technologies to clean the air. Why can't we make a regulation that will actually reduce the amount of carbon released to the environment? Cars, so many, second-hand cars, so many. Why are we not talking about getting cars also installed to reduce the emission to the environment? So that way, I think we will actually reverse the impacts that we are getting, and we will see a lot of rain. If it doesn't rain, we are headed towards our worst scenario. Imagine you are sick with malaria, and they tell you have a fever. All right? So climate change is the fever. But what is the root cause of the malaria itself? We need to deal with the root cause. So running to pour money on climate change itself, to me, it's not the solution. Let's go back to the root cause. We've destroyed our biodiversity. We've destroyed our environment. We've sacrificed development. We've given development priority more than the forest. We've destroyed our water catchment area. So let's not deal with the fever. Let's deal with the problem. The problem is we need to go back to our environment. How are we treating the environment? Are we using pesticides that when it rains, the pest just flows right into the river, and it is the same river that ends up in River Ndekaine, and then it's collected from there, then it is pumped again back to our houses in Nairobi. Once chemicals get into the water, we end up drinking chemicals in our water. That's why I say it's our behavior. It's about our behavior and our practices. We need to change.
Interesting observation there. Steve, we come to the end of the conversation. Unless there's final word you'd like to say when it comes to us adapting to the situation and trying to take action against climate change.
I want to speak to Kenyans because I'm also a victim of climate change impacts as I talk. Ask yourself the question, what can I do to reverse my present situation? Don't wait for government. Government help will always come a bit too late. Do the little you can, and I'm sure that through your contribution, you'll be able to influence somebody else. And if you can only rally about 50 people from your community, you will be able to feel the impact of that effort collectively, because no single person can actually reverse the impacts that we have. Number two, rethink about agriculture. Rethink. If a particular crop doesn't do very well, think about a crop that will do very well and give you money so that you buy the one that you cannot grow. And that's why I talk about climate smart agriculture. And to government, give us the right extension services. Give us the right information and make markets available to the ordinary Kenyan. That way, we will not destroy the environment. Finally, I don't know what we are going to do about charcoal. Let's run away from charcoal and let's go for eco-sustainable briquettes.
Thank you, Steve. Renewable energy is the way to go.
Yes.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to have you here, and I love the way you break down the idea of climate change for someone who thought it's just about today it didn't rain. There's more to it, and it's fever. It's the things that you're doing. Interesting.
Yes.
Well, I've been speaking to the CEO of Conservation Alliance Kenya here tonight to talk about climate change, the impacts of climate change and what we can do to adapt and mitigate to it, and of course the government's position and what we need to do when it comes to climate finance. The issue of climate change is really wide, and of course we can't finish it in this little time that we have here, but with conversations like the one we've had with the CEO, hopefully it goes a long way in informing and educating us about what we can do to save our environment. My name is Chemtai Kiri. That's all we had for you today. I'm hoping to see you on the next one. Have a blessed one. Bye.